Let the church say amen. Let the church say amen again. For the next who knows how long, we're going to be not having our Sunday school classes outside, so we'll probably continue with these online versions. Today we're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians 6:12. The Apostle Paul says, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. I'm a very black and white thinker. Things are either black or white. There's not usually any room for gray, and I can go really quick to the worst case scenario in black thinking. Utter catastrophe is just a quick thought away. But I understand this is a fallacy. This is illogical thinking. I know that there is normally middle ground, and in a lot of cases, like politics for example, middle ground is a good place to be. So sometimes when we get into some of these concepts in the Bible, I find it difficult, because of my black and white thinking, to think of things coming together and congealing in such a way that an initial look at the topic may not give us. We were looking at our development of faith, suffering, trials, and tribulations. And yet we find another side of the coin. Solomon writes, Go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. There's the concept of eat, drink, and be merry. We were just talking about suffering. How can the Bible tell us to do the same things? In fact, Solomon was just saying that he had spent his whole life going after the desires of his heart, and it all was vanity, futileness. He found no joy in any of that. And yet at this point, he says, Go, have a joyful heart in drinking and being merry. It becomes a very strange idea. How do we put the black and white together? And the Apostle Paul comes by, and again he says, with the same dichotomy of thought, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. Solomon's point was that as long as we were acting out of our own self-desires, everything was going to be futile. It wasn't going to serve our inner needs. But when we got into the idea of our God and our faith, and we put all of these desires in subjection to that, then it was all a gift from God that we could enjoy. Paul here says that we can do a lot of things, but they may not be beneficial to our journey of faith. He says that whatever it is we're doing, it becomes more important to us than our journey of faith, then we have a problem. An old friend of mine told me about how he loved to play chess. And there was nothing wrong with playing chess. But one day, he realized that during his prayer time, he was letting his mind wander off and was beginning to start thinking about chess moves. And he said at that point he knew he was being mastered by his desire to play chess. And he needed to take a time out for a while. While there was nothing wrong with playing chess, he knew that it was becoming a master to him. Hi. And when we lose our primary focus of Christ, then we have a problem. In the old days of holiness, there were a lot of prohibitions against things, such as gambling, smoking, alcohol, and such things. And a lot of the people over the years have said, well, this is legalism. The Bible doesn't prohibit these things, so we can sure do them. But the old time preachers and teachers knew that these things were not beneficial to one's journey of faith. The old time preachers and teachers knew that it was much too easy to be mastered by these things. Abraham had a lot of things to enjoy. He was a fairly rich person, a fairly notable person in Canaan. His only real problem was that he kept having to go get his nephew Lot out of the troubles that he managed to get himself into. But over the years, he had become mastered by his love for Isaac. And well, why not? Isaac was his son. Isaac was the gift from God. Isaac was his heir to the fortunes that he had. Isaac was heir to God's promises. The love for a son is indeed a good thing. But God came to Abraham and said, I want you to sacrifice your son. I want you to put your son on the altar. Now, this wasn't a metaphorical altar. This was a real stone altar, and Abraham had a real knife. It was when Abraham showed his willingness to sacrifice his own son on the altar before God that God could say, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son, I know that you love me. Why would Abraham be willing to sacrifice his own son? It was because he knew God and knew that God would meet his promises. The writer of the book of Hebrews tells us Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And in a manner of speaking, he did receive Abraham back from the dead. That's faith, the basic of faith. That we believe God will keep his promises. Even when all the circumstances around us might seem to be falling apart, we can have faith because we know God and we know that he'll keep his promises. In the words of the old hymn writer, we can never prove the delights of his love until all on the altar is laid. For the favor he shows and the joy he bestows are for them who will trust and obey. Hey, there's that idea of joy again. Remember, James says, count it all joy. Solomon says, eat and drink with a joyful heart. The Apostle Paul says, rejoice. And again, I say rejoice. St. John of the Cross spoke about some things called attachments. The things that we hold to dearly, the things that we cherish, those were the things that we are attached to. He says that we can only go forward in our journey of faith if we let go of those attachments. We can only find that joy in our Christian lives if we let go of those attachments. It doesn't mean we have to get rid of them, for they are gifts of God, as Solomon was saying. And of course, James said, all good gifts come from God. But it means we have to let our emotional attachment to things slide away. There have been many things that I've had an emotional attachment to, mostly about being successful. I've always wanted to be successful at the things I'm trying to do. And my self-esteem has been wrapped up in whether I succeed at something, whether I do it well. The same thing went into my education. Well, that was part of the doing things well, accomplishing things. I could put that on my accomplishment list. And whether I accomplished that had to do with my self-esteem. What kind of a person was I? One who could accomplish things, one who could stand out, people would take notice of? I figured I could put it on my accomplishment list. That list made me feel good about myself. The other side, a list of things that I failed at, hadn't succeeded at, well, that didn't make me feel so good about myself. All of my sense of self-worth was in achievement. And one day, all of that was taken away from me. My sense of belonging, my sense of security, my sense of accomplishment was all taken away from me. And it wasn't until I began to let go of my attachment to those things that I began to see the joy, the happiness that we can find in the Christian life. I still struggle with this when things come along that aren't all that good. But I know, as another old hymn writer said, whatever my lot, he has taught me to say, it is well in my soul. There is indeed a lot of wisdom in the 12-step mantra of let go and let God.